Morning, guys. Go ahead and talk about mollusca here with the lights on so it's easy to see the slides. Morning. Okay. A little bit here. Okay. As I talked just briefly, real quick, about yesterday, about just the simple direction we're going with the inverts. It'll be the same format, same layout. Okay. We have basically 4 phylums left: mollusca, Echinodermata, Arthropoda, and Annelida. Okay, so, and we'll go from there. Well, mollusk or mollusca in the Latin form basically translates to soft bodies. Okay, and there's quite the wide range from them because a lot of times we forget because of an outer shell or an outer hard carapace, which is like a shield or something, some type of an exterior type skeleton, and not thinking about the interior body part. We don't think of that as being part of this group, meaning soft body. Okay. But obviously there's a lot of variation, as you'll see at the end, with the different classes that go with it. Right? So a couple characteristics go with it. First of all, they're a soft body animal that usually have an external or external shell. And you'll see that not only with some of the examples, but when we watch one of my favorite videos called The Kings of Camouflage, which emphasize a lot on an organism called the cuttlefish. They have a interior bone, cuttle bone, that's where the name cuttlefish comes from, that they'll talk about, and that's an interior one, but from the outside it looks like a completely soft body, like a squid or something of that nature. Okay. This group actually includes all snails, slugs, clams, squids, and octopi. So that's a very wide range of organisms. Okay. And I also added in there, and you will see from the video that I have, the Kings of Camouflage, later this week or first next week, that they are the smartest problem-solving inverts groups because of squids and octopi, mostly the octopi, and cuttlefish are extremely intelligent too that fit into that same category. But talking specific species, yes, they have very good ability to figure things out, right? In laboratory settings and things, okay? They all share similar developmental stages, okay? Many have what they refer to as an aquatic mollusk, what they call a trochophore, which is basically, it looks like a little seahorse type, or what they refer to as, we'd be more familiar with, like a larval stage, okay? So there's a tweener. So they go kind of through, if you want to call a metamorphosis or a step 1, 2 after their birth, okay? And they just give them all a general, if you want to refer to it like a newborn, the term trochophore refers to that larval stage of aquatic mollusks, okay? Annelids, which are the segmented worms, which I explained yesterday that I should have had the annelids in front of this on the PowerPoint, which is no big deal, but I forgot to switch them because simply the annelids, or the third set of worms, is the first time the body plan of acoelomate, which I explained it yesterday, but I'm sure we forgot, which means the internal body cavity is completely lined with mesoderm. So there's pockets, empty cavities, which like we have in our internal intestinal region, which is where like the kidneys and the lungs and livers, any and all of our internal systems develop from, okay? And the acoelomate body plan, which shows up first in annelidias, which means segmented worms like your earthworms and leeches and things like that. Everything from here on out, which mollusks next, arthropods, echinoderms, and then get into the vertebrates, all follow that body plan layout, okay? So if I was talking in a true, which apologize for that, in the sense of a true cladiogram, what comes next? It should have been the annelids, if you think of from a developmental, and obviously they have very similarities. I mean, for some of you thinking worms, worm, flatworm, roundworm, segmented worm, what does it matter, okay? But there are a lot of interesting details to each one of them that separates them more than just a squishy, slimy little creature that, you don't want to touch, all right, or you don't want to talk about, okay? So, annelids also have, that's what I was talking about down here, that's why when I explained that, because the term annelids came, annelids also have a trochophore larva, indicating that the two groups are very closely related, and they are, okay? So it could go, there's those that could argue, like I said, I put this one in front, but if I wanted to go from earliest developmental stages, meaning in that germ layer stuff, I could have put the annelids in front of us, okay? All right, so body plan, all right, so get right into the system analysis of that, okay? Basically, they have 4 basic parts. They have what they call a foot, a mantle shell, and a visceral mass, okay? So the foot is the actual, like if you've had clam chowder or something like that, that's actual, like that's the muscle. So a lot of times if you've ever seen like a clam or a mussel or something kind of open up its bivalve or shells and you see like this fleshy thing kind of move along the edge, it almost looks like its tongue licking its lips, that's its foot. It's like just basically a strong muscular type structure that they use for movement and various digging and forcing various things and other stuff as well. The mantle is that thin little layer. If you ever had like oysters on a half shell, it's that thin layer of tissue that you would, if you had a half shell, you take a spoon and you scrape it underneath the bottom of the shell that would separate the steamed mussel or the raw oyster or something like that, if that's what you're eating. Okay, if you like that stuff, I do. But that's it. Also, the mantle is kind of like the first primitive development of mesentery, which is that thin type transparent, very, very low vascularized tissue that basically like holds our intestines and our kidneys and all that stuff kind of intact where it is. And when you stand on your head, stuff doesn't all get shifted and twisted and fall upside down and so on. So the mantle is kind of like, eventually gives rise in larger vertebrates and so on, what we call mesentery, all right? Shell, obviously pretty self-explanatory. It's produced by a gland. Usually it's made out of like a calcium carbonate, similar to that of what our bones are made of, all right, calcium carbonate, okay, same type of structure, okay? And then the visceral mass, AKA guts, okay, that'd be all, whatever organs those particular structures got. So consists of everything inside, you know, the body cavity, or like I said, the gut pack, the visceral cavity, the gastrovascular cavity, all those things mean the same thing. It's right in here, okay? All right, feeding. So basically mollusks are herbivores, carnivores, and filter feeders. So since there's such a wide range of them, mollusks feed in all the possible ways, okay? Snails and slugs, for example, feed using here's a couple examples. They got a thing called a radula. It's like a little drill bit, and it has like little barbs on it. So it almost feels like really grit of sandpaper, but they will use that tongue type structure to scrape, all right, or feed uses flexible tongue a lot of times, and they scrape along certain to take algae or whatever type of material. It's like a really fine sandpaper. So it's almost you would never feel it, but if you ever had a cat like lick your finger, or whatever, it feels rough like that. To something that same similar structure and have that kind of gritty type stuff. Just something to abrasive to knock the material off so they can eat. Okay. Let's see. Has hundreds of tiny teeth. Obviously, like I said, to scrape algae, or in some cases, some drill through shells of animals to eat the prey. If you've ever found a little tiny half of a clam shell or something like that on the beach that has a tiny little, looks like somebody took a little drill bit and drilled through it, then it's been eaten by one of their fellow comrades within the mollusk kingdom, probably a snail that is attached to it, and it's taken this little radula and slowly scratched through that until it could get through that, and then it was able to abstract the soft body mass or whatever and eat. Okay, so but a lot of times if you ever find those little shells are on vacation, those little tiny, it literally looks like somebody took a perfect drill bit and put a perfect circle through it. That's what happened. That was a radula, or a flexible tongue-like structure with those little tiny teeth. It was like a drill bit that went through it. Okay. Oops, wrong button. Let's see, spacebar. Can't see the spacebar. All right. Okay. So another example: octopi, for example, and sea slugs have sharp jaws, like squids and things like that. They have like a parrot-type beak that are kind of like shears that kind of go over the top, the same way scissors close. Very sharp, very strong, depending on the size of the organism. Very strong, almost like, think of them like the same way as yard shears or something that would cut limbs, okay? Shellfish use like what they call a feathery gill, and it actually does look like a feather under thing. And they filter feed, so it's kind of like a screen, and as stuff floats through it, it catches particles. The same basic concept is kind of like how a sponge, but it looks like a feather and gills, so thus the term feathery gill, all right? They have a thing called a siphon, which is, it almost looks like the same type of a tube that is like a wave runner. Right? Water comes in, jet thing, like jet propulsion. You put your throttle, it pushes the water faster out, turns the back jet, whatever, and that's what moves your sea-doos and things like that. So they have like a siphon to suck the water in to move material across those gills, and then they have an exterior siphon, same thing, like a drain that they shoot the excess water out or whatever other materials they need to pass out through them. Okay. Breathing wise, aquatic mollusks, they use gills. Okay. So obviously gills, the same basic cavity, they were able to pull oxygen from the water. Okay. Land snails and slugs will must keep their mantle cavity moist, because if they don't keep it moist, all right, it shrinks and dries up. You see what happens to a slug or a snail when you put salt, all right, or if it gets caught out on the hot asphalt or thing after a rainstorm. Okay, if it dries out the outer perimeter of that, they can't breathe, they suffocate. Okay, so they can't diffuse stuff across the blood. They can't, soak things in and out in the bloodstream, and it'll kill them. Circulation and nutrients are carried by, first time we have a circulatory system. So we actually have, just like our veins and arteries, very basic, but it's called an open circulatory system, which basically blood leaves the vessel, goes into a cavity, oxygenates, and then flows, slowly moves, mollusks back, will go back out. So it's kind of like a teeter-totter. So it's like all the stuff, or like a eyedropper. All the blood will get squeezed out into the body, okay, oxygenated, does its thing, and then it drains back into the stenosis cavity, which is where it picks up the oxygen, and then does it again. It's okay to have that type of setup, what they call an open circulatory system. It's kind of where it just basically goes back and forth, and that's usually associated with mollusks that move real slow, don't have high motor function stuff, very simple, so they don't need a high oxygen content to generate movements and thoughts and things and processes like that, so it works for them. Okay, so it's basically, think of it like an eyedropper. The eyedropper being like where the lung type gills are at to pick up the blood, and it squeezes it, empties out into the body, drops off its oxygen, drains back, and repeats the process. Okay. Now closed is what we're familiar with. That's what we have. We have a closed circulatory system. Ours looks like a figure 8. Okay, in and out through the heart. Right. So closed circulatory system, basically the blood remains in the vessels, more efficient delivery system for faster moving stuff. So it doesn't do the backwards. It stays in a normal flowing pattern. Okay, so that's what it means by the vessel, stays in the vessel. Squid, octopi, things that are very fast moving, they actually very problem solving, hunters, that type of stuff. So yeah, they have to have a little better system, obviously, for processing important stuff. So oxygen is an important thing for that. So they have a little better system. So you see within one phylum, 2 complete, first time talking about a circulatory system, but they have an open and a closed system depending on what they do. Okay, so very fascinating, very broad range, very diverse group of soft-bodied animals that at first glance, if you saw them all, you think, big deal, they're all the same. No, they're not. Okay, they're similar, but they have a lot of really cool upgrades, if you might want to think, if you're thinking automobile type stuff, that makes them really cool. Okay. Excretion, how they get rid of waste. All right, here we go. Now we have not necessarily diffusion, but many of them have these things called nephrididia, which are the basic structure of a kidney. Okay, as kidneys start to develop, okay, eventually, but these are the starting of removing ammonia, that waste toxic product from the blood. Okay, and they'll release it to the outside of the body. Okay, so it's ammonia basically. So they have little tiny structures that work as filter pumps and start to do that for them. Response, so we're talking now brain activity. Complexity of the nervous system varies greatly, so they have a wide range. Okay, so for example, clams and 2 shells or bivalve mollusks just have what they call a ganglia. Remember, a ganglia is like 1 or 2 nerve cells. Okay, not very much, right? 1 or 2 nerve cells near the mouth that process information to form sense organs, chemical receptors, eye spots for light and dark shades. Not a lot of fancy stuff, but it gets the job done for them. But then you get into your octopi, which are what we would classify as intelligent predators, okay, very good problem-solving predators. Okay, they have a much highly developed nervous system of the invertebrates. In fact, highly developed brain capable of remembering. Okay, so first time we're actually using the word brain with invertebrates. Okay, in this capacity, because they are very, very intelligent. Okay, and like the key thing there is they're able to remember. Right, movement. A little different than everything. The slug trails, or the little mucus trails you'd see, helps it glide, helps to keep them from drying out, plus it also helps lower the friction capabilities for them, so they move from point A to point B. Less friction means easier movement. More moisture means less heat retention. Less heat retention means they don't dry out as easy. Makes sense. Clams, they burrow in the hatchet, so if you've ever scooped up in the sand, if you're playing right there on the beach, and you pitch up those little tiny ones, and they stand up, you'll see them all of a sudden go wiggle and just disappear really quick back into the sand. Okay? So what you can't see is they stand up on their edge, open up their little seam, and the little foot will kind of wiggle the same way you stand in the sand, and you can twist your feet back and forth and bury your own feet in the sand. Okay? Oops, I did that again. Response, got it. Whoops. Let me make sure that I'm not running out of memory real quick. We good? Okay. All right. So almost done. So you got your fast-moving squids, and octopi use what they call like a jet propulsion. Best way to something you guys are familiar. It's the same way sea-doos and wave runners work. Okay. They collapse, or if you've ever done like a breaststroke or like a pull-out type thing in a swimming pool where you make yourself like an umbrella where you here and then pull back through. Okay, or if you have paddles or close your fingers, you're just pushing against the horse. You're pushing against a medium, right? In this particular case, the water's drawn into the mantle like the upside umbrella, and then when they clasp and go streamline, forces them like an arrow through, all right, as well, okay? Reproduction, a lot of mollusks are hermaphroditic, meaning they have both fully functioning male and female reproductive organs, okay? Snails and bivalves, or two-shelled mollusks, release enormous numbers of eggs and sperm. We call that external fertilization. I've used the term reproduction by attrition. It assures them by releasing so much of their gametes, egg and sperm, out into the water that it's much easier for them to fertilize, reproduce in vast numbers, and to help recoup, all the predators and preys, and for those that just don't make it to adulthood to reproduce, okay, for whatever purpose, okay. In tentacle mollusks like your squids and cuttlefish and so on, you'll see that really cool in the kings of camouflage. And some snails, they do internal fertilization. Actually, is the regular mating, courtual, and all that kind of stuff too as well. So I think you'll find that really interesting. All right, so here's some of our groups of mollusks. All right, so first of all, you got your first group called your gastropods. Gastro basically is referring to like your gastrointestine, like your gut. Poda means foot. So basically, it translates to gut on foot, if you want to think about it. Which makes sense. You just got this blob of snail, slugs, sea hares, limpets, nudibranchs. These are all different types of what they call gastropods. Basically, they are shellless or single-shelled mollusks that move by 1 foot on the ventral side. Ventral side being the belly. Dorsal's back, so everything moves on the belly side. Okay, all right. Snails can completely withdraw within their shell, and then they can seal it off with a hard plate to protect themselves or from drying out. But a lot of times, predators obviously can wrap around them, bust through that, and pull the little soft body out and eat some sushi. Okay? All right. Also prevents, most importantly though, for them is evaporation, especially if they're small and they're up on low tide, washing up on the beach, and they get caught up on the sand. They can close that off, keep themselves from drying out. Okay? Sea hares have like a squirting ink, which is just some of the many different types of ones. Same things like squids and so on. They have little ink cartridge that will confuse predators and leaves kind of a foul odor taste to them in the water. Okay, so as well. Here's some various ones, some really cool ones: snail, slug, sea hare, and here's I think it's a limpet. But notice the bright colors of these two, right? Same rules of thumb. Bright like that, they stick out and they look really, really pretty. That tells predators, go ahead and mess with them, toxic. Okay. The brighter, nature kind of follows those simple rules. The brighter, more vibrant, iridescent looking colors that don't blend in is kind of a fair warning to say, even though I'm soft and small, go ahead, bite me and see what happens. I'm toxic, I'm poison, something of that nature. I don't taste good. So those are key things, just like the rainforest, but these are organisms obviously found in aquatic settings that have the same type of mentality. Okay? Some nudibranchs have chemicals, like I just said, that make them taste bad and are very poisonous. Their bright colors serve as warnings, okay, like I just told you, okay? The ones you're more familiar with are like your bivalves, your two shells, okay? Clams, oysters, mussels, scallops, some of my favorite things to eat, okay? So bivalve meaning two parts, clap, clap, clap. Hopefully I'm gonna find me a clam back there. I'll do a virtual dissection with you. When I'm done with this video, I'm gonna look back in my lab, prep stuff, and see what I got for specimens. They use that to burrow down into the sand, mud, whatever type of thing, get out of the direct line of fire from water movement and predators and so on. They can use fibers like a secretion. You'll see them attached to rocks. You've seen divers with knives, barnacles, and so on, along piers and whatnot. Okay. Scallops can move around by clapping. So basically, as they're falling, they kind of clap. And how they clap and they move like this is they open up, water gets in. When they clap, it's no different than you swimming or doing a breaststroke type motion, pushing the water out or pushing yourself through. They do the same thing. Okay. Filter feeders, same thing. Bivalves open up, they move material in, cilia and so on. Gills to trap particles in the water. Irritants can be coated with the first mother of pearl. Now, I've always wanted to look deep into this stuff. And pearls form from a grit of sand or debris, depending on where the oyster pearls are found, the color of the sandy beach, whether it be black or off-white or whatever it is. But what they do is they start to secrete like a mucus around it, to the same way, I guess, like you get a blister with a splinter, like a little water pocket, and that's kind of how they pack around. So at the center of a pearl, a natural forming pearl, should be like a grain of sand or silt or something that has literally kind of like gotten down in their mantle, like in their lower lip region, if you want to refer to that. That's irritant that then they secrete and coat it, and that's what forms it. So here is a diagram of a cross-section of a clam that hopefully I'll be able to show dissection. These two structures are the tough muscles, the same way like here the jaw, like the masseter for chewing. So this holds the top of the bottom, okay? This is, you see how it looks like a feathery gill? This would be all the visceral mass. And then basically this all right here, this even shows you the little mantle, which is this little thin layer. And here's the foot. This is like the meat. So if you ever had clam chowder, they cut this part out and they chop it up, and that's the chunks of clam chowder that they put in with the nice clam chowder. If you ever had clam chowder, it's the foot, just like meat from chicken or whatever it is. Okay? If you ever had oysters on the half shell, you would hold the shell like this and take a spoon and scrape it underneath it, all up underneath this, and just eat the whole thing. Okay? Or if you steam them, or mussels, and you know when they're cooked, when you get mussels at a restaurant, they open up. Okay? That's them telling you, okay, I'm dead, I'm cooked. Okay, and that's how you know they're fully cooked the right way, and you're not worried about getting things like salmonella. No, I don't want that. Okay, cephalopod. Cephalo means head, so there's head on foot. Those are your cool ones, your octopi, your squid, your cuttlefish, and even your chambered nautilus. Okay, these are the smartest of the invertebrates groups. The head's attached to the foot, divides into many tentacles underneath that. Like for example, the nautilus can have as many as 90 tentacles underneath it, chambered nautilus. Gases are secreted into the shell and trapped, which allows them the buoyancy, the same way the ballast tubes work for a submarine. And they can control that, okay, and allow them to hold depth, rise, fall, whatever they need to do. They have highly developed brains and sense organs. And when you see my favorite movie, I talk about again, the Kings of Camouflage, you will see that in its entirety. So here's a chambered nautilus. There's all those 90 tentacles. Every one of these little lines represents there's chambers in here. That's where they store all the gases. They actually have the first type of compound eye for depth perception, like the way our eye is set up. So they really do have good vision, as you notice with the elongated and slit where the pupil is developing. So we also start to see in inverts a development of a much advanced vision type depth, okay, as far as like focusing, all right? And it's not just an eye like an oculi that shows shadows, lights, and darks like that. Here's a giant squid up here, Architeuthis, octopi, that's cuttlefish, and you'll really, really like the video. I know I've said that like 4 times, but you really will, okay? Some things about mollusks, we're about done here. Mollusks are very important food sources. Obviously, I love to eat them, seafood. Bivalves form a symbiotic relationship, bacteria and algae. Bivalves are filter feeders, so we can tell a lot about there's that term, environmental monitors or indicators. We can tell what's going on, pollution or disrupting in ecosystems and so on. For dangerous pollutants and microorganisms, snails are being studied as to why they never, and I haven't looked into this in a few years, but they've never found any types of cancerous types growth. So, taking something as abundant as simple snail, see if there's some type of an enzyme or some undeveloped. Why don't they have anything of that type of abnormality, malicious growth of cells? So, and like I said, so that's something I'm going to look into and see if I find some new stuff here too as well, since I have some downtime, and see what I can come up with, right? And like I said, obviously help us fight cancer in humans. Okay, and that was it. Okay, and that brings us to Annalyn. So I'm going to go and cut this off so I don't have eat up too much memory. But this will be posted for Friday's class.